Okay, so this video is on how to do a fancy podcast. So if you want to step up your game a little bit, you can buy an official microphone. This is Blue Snowball, costs about 50 bucks on Amazon. And then this is a pop blocker, so you don't get the pop, 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 pop. It blocks some of the sound. So you put it about 6 inches from there, you talk 6 inches from there, it plugs into your USB port. Now you got an official microphone, and it does sound better. Much wider range of sound, more bass basically. So now you got your microphone. Then you got to pay like 20, 30 bucks a month to get Adobe Audition. Adobe Audition is pretty simple, but you can't buy it. You have to pay the monthly fee now to Adobe, but whatever. So you go to that, you open up your Adobe Audition, you go to File. We're going to start with New, Multi-Track Session. You click on that. What do you want to call your session? We'll call it Fancy Podcast, and you save it. So now we got our own session. And you open it up, automatically they have a podcast format, which has host, interview, sound effects, and a music bed. So first of all, we'll start with our music. And in fact, the music, you can go to YouTube, and this is on YouTube /audio library /music, and they've got all this sound that is free. They've got certain things that are free, and you can just download the music, download whichever one you want. And so you've got your music. Now my music, I like Grasshopper, so I'm going to take Grasshopper and put it here in the sound effects. And check out Grasshopper, it's pretty cool. Pretty good sound, nice and hip, good energy. So that's our music. Now this is a huge file, so I want to shorten this file because we don't want that much music. And you can watch, you can zoom in, zoom out like you do on almost any computer. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. I'm going to shorten this audio file to just that part. And then we can take a look at it. This space bar up here shifts the whole thing. I'm really zoomed in. I'm zoomed out. Whoop. And then we can shift this over so you can see the file. Zoom in a little bit more. Okay, that's something we can work with. So there's our audio file, and you can bring this blue thing back here. You can hit play. You can listen to it, and you can cut it to how much intro music you want. So now we're going to record an intro because every podcast has to have a good intro. So what we're going to do, this is the host. This input, this arrow right here means input. So you click on that, you go to mono speaker. Look, Blue Snowball, there it is. If it doesn't pick up the speaker, when you come up here to Adobe Audition, you go to Preferences and you go to Audio Hardware, and you can pick Blue Snowball. You can pick this, it'll know the microphone, it'll read it here and you can pick that, but it already knows that I'm using Blue Snowball. So you come here, again, you go to the host, you go to the input, it says none. We're going to change it to Blue Snowball. Now it knows where the sound is coming from. And see this little R button? That is to record. Now we're going to come down here. The M button is for mute. I'm going to mute the sound effect so that we don't hear it as I'm trying to record the intro. So I hit mute on that. We're coming back up here. We got the record button. We got our blue arrow right where we want it after a little bit of intro music. Now to record our intro, you just hit the record button. Stay about 6 inches away here. I'm going to hit record. Hi, this is Robert Watkins with the best podcast station on the planet. And you hit end. Now you've got your intro sound, which you can do over and over again. Oh, and check this out. You want to fade in and fade out the sound. See this little bar? You drop it down and that can fade in. You can make it diagonal. You can make it however you want it. Generally, you do it like this so that it fades out quickly. Fade in, fade out quickly. Now here's how you fade in. You drop this one from the beginning, fade in, do your sound, fade out, and look, now we'll move the blue back here and you can listen to it. All right, you ready? Oh wait, let me unmute this so we can hear the music.
Hi, this is Robert Watkins with the best podcast station on the planet.
And then the music kicks in, and it's sounding pretty good. So you can have this template, which you can use every time now. So you can actually save this as a template. Then every time you want to do a new podcast, you just pull this one up. And to do the actual podcast part, we're going to start where this blue is. We're going to start at the end of the music. I'm going to mute this one. I'm going to turn the record off on this one. Now we're going to go to the interview. We got to do our input. Our input is going to be the blue snowball. We're going to hit record. Now we're going to start recording where this blue line is. At the end of the music, I want to get the podcast started. Go back down here to the record button. Today's podcast is on back and neck pain because that's all I know about. So that's all I talk about over and over again. So that's our podcast. Now we got our podcast going. And with the music, we're going to fade out the music so that it comes over. Then we're going to fade in that day's podcast. There's a nice blend between the two. And then as you're recording, so say I start recording, and at the end, one thing you got to be careful of, to stop the recording, you can hit the space bar. If you hit the space bar too loud, the mic's going to pick it up, and you'll hear this pop every time you stop and start. So anyway, you can just fade that out. So see this little green thing here? It looks like I made a little bit of sound. I can take this and just fade it out to get rid of that, to cut off that sound. You can play with it, but as you record, basically, say I didn't like what I listened to, I can bring the blue back, I can hit that.
That's all I talk about over and over again.
So I can listen to it, and if I don't like a certain part, I can just cut it. And then take my blue line, and you can even hit this. See this space bar with an edge? It'll take it right to the edge. And then you can start recording again. So you can edit it as you're going so that once you're done with the podcast, you're done. You don't have to go back and listen to the whole thing. But you can play with it to get the different components. You got your music, you got your intro, you got your podcast, you're ready to roll. Now when you're done with it, just go up here to the file, do file, save as, fancy podcast. So you want to save the file. This is within Adobe Audition file. But then ultimately to publish it, you go back to file, you go to export, multi-track mixdown, entire session, and then you save it as an Adobe file, fancy podcast. I just save it as an MP3 file. You can change, I never change any settings. The way it comes, good enough, save it, fancy podcast. Now it's saved. Now when you go to your Spreaker webpage, we go to this, we go to Spreaker, and when we get to Spreaker, we just go to our audio files, go to the create, upload your files, and select your show. I'll save it to my dad's show. Drag your audio file here, go to podcast, and then pick up your Adobe file and fancy podcast. There it is. We just recorded it. Here it is. It's ready to go. And then basically you just download the file and it automatically goes on there. And so you can upload it to Spreaker to everybody you want. That's the fancy form of the podcast. A better sound, better quality, fancy intro music, still pretty basic. Once you have your template, you just plug in your new podcast and you're ready to go.